Hello guys, and welcome back to the How to Animate YouTube channel. So I thought I'd do a regular video this time instead of a live stream, just so I can do a bit more editing and actually kind of concentrate on what I want to talk about a bit more. So you can see I've done some work off camera and got the blocking completed. Okay, she jumps up on the back, stabs him in the head, and then the pull out, and then he kind of wiggles about and dies. Cool. So it's getting there. I did an interesting comment on the last video asking if I could play blast it. So yeah, I mean I could, but it would zip by like this. Okay, so the thing with this method is I'm not worried about timings at this point. I'm worried about having the right amount of poses that I can then space out later on. But what I'm looking for is any gaps that I basically don't trust Maya not to do. Maya's very good at just drawing a point from one point to another. As long as you give it enough information, then it will do a pretty good job. So yeah, with this method, it's not the only method I use. You know, sometimes I will just animate straight ahead, sometimes I use layered. This isn't the only method of animation, you know. It's just a very good one for beginners to learn because it's all a bit too much at first. You know, you're thinking about, you know, posing and time, you know, all this stuff. You can just get super overwhelming. This way, you can block out. You don't have to worry too much about timings. You do need to worry about having the right amount of poses. So, for example, the pull out here. You know, I'm planning ahead. I know from here to here, this is a very quick anticipation as it currently stands. It's only 2 frames. This would not do. It would go past way too fast, and the audience wouldn't be able to understand what I'm doing. But I left 2 poses here that are very similar to each other that, you know, I know in future I'm going to space these out. Probably going to give it, you know, 6 to 8 frames of anticipation coming down and then a quick pull out, and probably leave more time up the top here as well, going into the settle as she comes back. Okay, so I feel pretty confident that this can be moved ahead into what we call the timing pass. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a button that basically selects everything on the character, on both characters, and then I can start spacing this out. Okay, so I've added everything to this button up here using pose to shelf. So that selects everything on both characters, including the FK, IK switches and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is start timing this out. So I've given myself loads of room. I'm guessing this is going to be around about 800 frames when it's finished, so give myself some room, and what I'm going to basically do is analyze each movement and then kind of just guess what kind of timings I want. So I'm animating at 30 frames a second because this is going to end up in Unreal. That's a good frame rate to work with in general. Okay, so obviously when I'm spacing this stuff out and, you know, letting Maya basically add all the in-betweens, I'm basically looking to do both characters at the same time, so it's really organised. What I don't want to do is start timing out, you know, each one individually. So what I'm going to do is just have a look at this first movement here. So we've got the dinosaur coming up, anticipating coming down nice and quick for the roar. She then enters her kind of battle pose, ready to go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just start basically spacing this stuff out. So I want a few frames kind of lead in. This guy's pretty big, so I don't want him to move about really fast. So I want to try and keep that in mind. I want to try and keep that weight, you know. Between here and here is the anticipation, so I'm going to give that quite a few frames. Okay, and then I want him to stamp down pretty quick, maybe just over 3 or 4 frames. Now it's going to look a bit floaty at first, but that's fine. I just want to get a general kind of sense of the timing. Okay, I can already tell that that's going to look crazy because he's up on that one leg. I don't want him to look like a ballerina, so he's going to be able to stand on that leg for a little while. So it might be something a bit more like that. Okay, that feels a bit better. And then I want the stamp down to feel a tiny bit quicker as well. Cool. Okay, he's then held here, so this bit here, I can just, it's ambient movement, but it's a bit of a face-off between the two of them, so you notice that she is looking very kind of floaty, like her timings are off. I'm not too concerned about that. Obviously I'll go back and kind of retime certain bits for her, but I'm always looking for who's doing the primary movement. Like her, she's just doing a step forward, that's nice and easy to retime. He is a little bit more involved. So there's only a certain amount you can kind of do when timing both characters at the same time. But I'm mostly looking at him for this section here. Okay, so we've got this raw, we've then got him anticipating back, so again, from here to here, that's a holding pose, so I'll just stretch this out. I want the face off to be, you know, long enough just to get a roar in, and I can add, you know, loads of little details here as he's roaring, you know, some kind of shaking as they're kind of facing off. I can give that a tiny bit more room. What I'm thinking is the audience as well. Like, it's not much of a lead-in, you know. And if you're watching this for the first time, it's like you got this quick movement into a roar. I'm just going to hold it there for a bit, just to give the audience, okay, this is what's going on. They're facing off, and then it's on during this part. So anticipate back. Okay, so I don't want that to feel too slow. He's going to come back pretty quick, but you can see between here and here I've left almost like a holding pose that I can really stretch out. So I might make this coming back to the anticipation a bit quicker. Comes back, hold, 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 builds up energy, lurches forward. And this is what I'm talking about, texture and timing. You want slow, fast, you know, you want that kind of texture. You don't want everything to feel the same kind of rhythm, you know. You want that interesting kind of feel to it. So it comes forward, bit of an ease in here, comes forward. Again, he's a big guy, so I need to make sure I'm not animating this like a little dinosaur. He's still going to take a bit of effort there to move. But once he does, you know, he's going to come forward relatively quick for the snap. Let me just get the camera around here so you can see what's going on. So it comes back and anticipates, comes through. It's going to knock a frame off that, so it's a tiny bit quicker. Otherwise, I want her to feel like that this could have got her. And if it's too slow, it's going to be, it'll just look silly, because it's like, why didn't you jump out of the way sooner? Alright, so I need to start concentrating a bit more on her timing here, because obviously she has got a jump, so that her anticipation works quite well there. But then you see here, it's starting to feel a bit slow, so I'm just going to bring that back. There we go, and then I'm just going to add a couple more frames to this. Jumps out of the way. So until I hit the play button, I don't actually know if this is all going to work. I'm guessing at the moment. But what I like to do is just very roughly get everything spaced out and then hit play, and then any bits that look really bad I'll just kind of go in and fix. Okay, so we've got this bit. You've got him stumbling forward, you've got her recovering, getting ready to anticipate into the throw. So I'm going to give that a bit more time there, a few frames. At the same time she's kind of landing, so I don't want it too slow, but here I can definitely space this out because he's still kind of coming forward. She has landed and needs a bit of time, a little bit of time on the floor here before going into the next movement. Okay, you notice I'm just doing this in perspective. I'm not too worried about the camera at the moment. I'm basically going to retime the camera afterwards. So I'm just kind of positioning the perspective camera roughly where he needs to be. Alright, so this part, we've got her down on the floor. She then decides to throw the spear. Next pose is a breakdown that goes into anticipation. So again, I want to space this out, and I've left myself a bit of room between here and here. So I'm just going to pull that along, because this is the breakdown that defines the arc of that. frames up. Okay, and then here we can give it a little bit more room as well. So we've got all these frames here of anticipation. Builds up energy, and then a quick release. So the throw itself, I'm just going to add a couple of frames here and there. That's probably a bit slow. Yeah, just a couple of frames. Okay, you see the spear's going a bit crazy there, but I was expecting some weirdness from that. That's fine, that can be fixed afterwards. Cool, he gets hit, so and he comes back. Now I need to be careful here because I want to keep his weight correct. He's going to get hit, and then obviously he's going to kind of go to the side because he's off balance, but yeah, so I'm just going to give that a few frames there. Okay, so I've got a good chunk of that done, so I'm just going to hit play and then see if there's anything that's majorly off. Got the raw. Oh, that's very slow. Okay, so you can see like some bits work and some bits don't. Raw feels quite good. This feels way too slow. You see how, yeah, I've just kind of added way too many frames, and that's kind of because she needs to jump out of the way. He needs to keep going forward. So what I'm going to do is just kind of move all that back a bit. So I think it's mostly, yeah, it's this part here. I'm just going to knock some frames off that. Yeah, it's this part, which kind of makes sense because she is just jumped across and she's going to be moving a bit faster as well, so probably something a bit more like that. Raws, lunges forward, that's a bit better. Okay, so this spear is winding me up a little bit, so what I'm going to do is just fix this up. And all this is I believe it's just a blend parent thing. So you'll see, I was hoping the blend parent would be switched on, although it's turned off. So I'm going to basically do some reparenting of this just to make sure it all works. Okay, so here's my time in pass. Okay, so it's still pretty rough in areas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through basically each bit, and any retiming I need to do on the individual character itself, then I'll do during that stage. So everything is still kind of organised. You know, both characters have got their keys on the same frame at the moment, but obviously I do need to break away from that at this point and get them moving kind of independently and make sure it's all working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this first bit here. I'm going to do now is to start cleaning this up. So I'm going to concentrate on the first 80 frames. I'm going to deal with each character at a time. So let's start with Aloy. So we've just got a simple kind of step forward, and you see how the timing looks a little odd because it's basically been spaced out for him, for his movement. So what I need to do is just kind of retime this a little bit. So we've got a bit of an ease in here. It goes super slow here, so I need to knock some frames off this, and then the step down needs to be quicker. I'm just going to simplify this foot. There's no reason it needs to kind of slide back. You can just sort of stay there. Okay, and then what I'll do is just add a tiny bit of toe roll here just to make it a bit more comfortable for her. So I've got the camera here as well because I want to make sure I pose to the camera as well. but in perspective you kind of catch things that you wouldn't necessarily. So it's always a good idea to have kind of both at the same time. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is the hips, because everything kind of branches from that, and if you get this wrong then nothing else really matters. So just the kind of core movement, the up and down motion of the step. I'm going to make sure that's nice first of all. Okay, so you see here she kind of pushes off. I'm going to put a bit more push off that foot in a second, but basically I want a bit more like this kind of shape, holding in the up position. So probably something a bit more like this, and then I want to get this foot stepping before the hips actually drop. So you're going to get that foot into position, foot drops, and then she absorbs the weight. So I always like to start with this curve first, because this is where a lot of the weight comes from, and that kind of feeds into the rest of the hierarchy. So if you do it any other order, I just find it a bit harder. So you got the step here, the weight absorption for that, and then the recovery. So it's going to look something like this. You've got down position, slight up position, then tapers off. Okay, so let's sort out the forward motion. You notice how it's kind of sticky. It's kind of like she's really slow and then she lurches forward really fast. So this can basically just simplified down into more like that kind of shape. Bit of an ease there. Okay, then we'll sort this foot out here. So basically you want to keep this foot on the floor just a tiny bit longer. Probably move that to about there, and then put this here. Activate a tiny bit of toe roll. Just as she kicks off. We then have our passes position, so I'll turn off toe roll, even though it's still toe rolling. It's probably... I probably used another control. Maybe that one, I don't know. I'll fix that in a minute. I need to dig into why that's doing that. Okay, and similar kind of shape to what the hips are doing. So what we'll do is create a nice shape like this. Switch this over to linear so it doesn't kind of ease into it. Actually don't mind that toe roll being there. It's not, I can just do something with the toe afterwards. Just going to stretch that out a little bit longer, just keep a foot there. You need like a bit more of a kick off. It's maybe a bit high, so just looking at the camera there. Cool. And another thing I need to do is look at it from this angle. So you see how bad this looks from this angle. That's basically because whenever you lift up your foot, you need to counter to the other side to be able to raise the foot. So without that you end up with some very strange effects. So about here I'm going to get her over to the left. Okay, and then she's going to basically follow the same kind of pattern as the translate Y. I'm just going to put a bit of an overshoot there just to absorb that weight coming back over. Okay, the leg there is now hyperextending, which kind of tells me I need to move this back a little bit. Just get this foot moving a little bit sooner. Okay, so we've got the step. There we go, that's starting to get there. Now I need to address, you see as her hips come forward here, there's absorption of the momentum in this direction but not forward. So this curve here, so what I'm going to do is just overshoot that ever so slightly like that. There you go, you see we start to build a little hook arc as it comes around. Which is kind of what I want. Can even offset that by another frame. Okay, and then she's held installed there. That's looking okay. Cool. Now I'm just going to feed this into the rest of the hierarchy. Now I've got the basic pattern down. So all these controls I'm just going to treat as a block. Let's move this down so we can see it in camera. Yep, so these ones here you can treat as a block unless you're doing anything very odd. Probably just delete all that junk in the middle, because all I really want is a slight rotation back in this direction, and then I want to kind of offset that into a slight down position, so we get this kind of thing, and then rotate back up. So basically building weight, you know, you've got the weight of the step that needs to feed in into the rest of the hierarchy at the top. Okay, it's not looking too bad. Let's get something into the shoulders as well at this point. So as you step in, get rid of this junk here, don't need it. As you step in, I want a slight translation up, and a slight rotation up as well. And again, I'm going to offset that so that her lowest position is here, but then the shoulders kind of catch up afterwards, because her arms aren't really under tension. They're basically going to react last. So nice bit of overlapping action there. So you've seen the camera there, she's starting to feel quite weighty. It's not been fed into the head, which you can kind of see. So let's do that now. So I do want to still have her looking at roughly at the dinosaur the whole time. So I'm going to look at it from this kind of angle just to make sure that as she steps, she's kind of looking up at him. At this point, still looking at him. Okay, and around about here is our lowest point. So I'm going to build a little down position there, just so the head kind of moves forward. Sorry, downwards slightly. Cool. So we've got a weighty spear, so we need to take the weight of the spear into consideration. So I don't think I need that stuff there, but I probably do need to break it down a bit more, so it's a bit more like that. Okay, so at this point, around about here, we're going to get a reversal where the spear is going to, because it's so heavy and she's just done a step, it's going to come down slightly like this. So this is our holding position here, being held up, weight comes down, spear comes down, then I'm just going to offset that wrist by a couple of frames too. Okay, it's not looking too bad. Cool. Right, let me just make this bigger so that I can show you what I've done. Alright, so I can see a little problem with this pole vector kind of coming in on itself. Oh yeah, okay. I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm not sure why that's there. Okay, so look. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. So there's a couple of ways you can set up the rig to do a pole vectors. You can either have them independent in world space, or you can have them kind of attached to the foot. In this case, it's attached to the foot. So as I'm rotating the foot in, it's kind of bringing the pole vector in, which is making it look weird. So what I need to do is basically just kind of be a bit kinder on the rotates there, just so it doesn't do that. Cool. And then this back arm here, you can't really see, but I'm just going to add a little something, a little bit of offsetting, a little bit of a low position there. Okay, at this point she's basically just idling, waiting. So I'm just going to start off from the hips and just keep this slightly alive. See what's happening with the up and downs. So I'm already got a slight up position there, which is fine. I'm just going to put a tiny down position there too. Just keep everything slightly slightly moving, then maybe front and back as well. Just a tiny bit of movement. These are always the hardest things, just to keep the character alive if they're not doing anything, so good tip is just be very, very subtle with it. Cool. Also we want to keep her kind of breathing a little bit as well. So there's a little trick that I could do here now, is actually add a breathe layer, almost. Sometimes it works, but I think it's worth a go. So I'm going to do animation layer. I'm going to select these three here. Can't spell breathe, no one. Actually, I'm going to add that one as well. Okay. So I just need to find a bit where she's kind of still. And what I'm going to do is just add on top just a breathe loop, which I can kind of use throughout the animation if I need to. Okay, now all this is you rotate this back like that. And you can go big with this as well, because you can weight the layer as well. But you basically do that. You counter rotate this one back and these ones forward, like so. So you see that's way too extreme. But what I can do here, select objects, I'm going to loop this front and back forever. And then just dial the weight down and keep the weight down as I need. So we'll just see if that actually adds anything, if it's even worth keeping. I would imagine it's going to add a tiny bit of movement, just to kind of keep her alive. Yeah, it's probably a little bit too much. Just going to dial it down even more. Might be a bit too quick as well, so I can slow that down by selecting the objects and just spacing this out a bit. So the pattern I want is probably something a bit more like that, with kind of a longer breath in and a shorter exhale. Okay, so just add a tiny bit of motion to the upper body. Cool, I'll keep it for now, and if I don't like it later I can always get rid of it. Okay, so I've done a bit of work off camera, so as you can see the start is looking quite nice now. Changed the timings a bit so that the dinosaur is going to stomp about here, and then she takes a step a little while after. I didn't want them moving at the same time, so you're supposed to look at him, then you look at her. So always a good tip if you got the opportunity to just have one character move at one time, then do that. Cool, so that's feeling quite good. So now what I'm going to do is just work on this little reaction of hers before he goes for the actual attack itself. So you see it looks pretty mechanical. We're just going from kind of pose to pose. I don't think I ever did a breakdown between here and here, so that's why it looks so kind of robotic. She kind of floats up. I imagine there is actually a breakdown there, but it's kind of doing, yeah, it's kind of doing the wrong thing. So we go from this pose basically to this pose. So what I'm going to do is just kind of retime that so it's in the middle, and then let's get a little bit of overlapping action just in the chest area, just to kind of keep it feeling nice and organic. So I'm going to do a slight down position here, just notch that down ever so slightly, make this an up position here. Okay, and then basically break this down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just lead, really subtle, but just lead slightly with this control, and then basically delay these two in the breakdown. So these will go downwards. And that'll just give her spine just a little bit of something in that area. And then I need it to come kind of back down afterwards. So get a bit of a reaction there. Okay, I think that's kind of working. So what I'm looking for now is just anything that looks a bit static and kind of robotic. You notice how her upper body is kind of nice, but her lower body is like completely dead, and you never want that in 3D animation. You always want to keep everything slightly alive. It's not so noticeable from here, but I can still kind of see it. So it's going to be a combination of this control and also the hip control just to keep it alive. So I'm just going to switch this over to spline to help me out. It's going to get her weight back a little bit and up. Maybe just rotate, just give that a bit of a nudge there. Okay, and then most of it's actually going to be in this control here, so I'm just going to give this a bit of a nudge, which will just kind of keep this whole area alive a little bit. Probably want to do like a tiny little anticipation down beforehand as well. Maybe just from here. So instead of her just coming straight up at this point, what I might do is actually start leading with the hips, so they sort of come up first, but then counter rotate down ever so slightly. Okay, so we've got something a bit more like this. And then what I want to do is just feed this into the shoulder, especially this arm here because it's right in camera, and just kind of delay that slightly. So around about here, just kind of drop it down so it's not coming up exactly at the same time. So there's a bit of an overlap, a bit of a delay in it. Okay, so if I play this now, yeah, it's not looking too bad. I think I could probably get a little bit more in the neck. So probably about here, just kind of delay the neck a little bit, come in up, and then maybe just overshoot it ever so slightly here, and then probably just keep her kind of looking straight at his head to make it nice and clear that she's got her eye on him and is anticipating this bite coming in. Right. So still something a little bit funny about this bit. So what I might do is actually try leading with the chest as well. Yeah, that works better. I mean, there's two ways you can do stuff. You know, if you've got the core motion kind of driving the action, whether it's sort of up and down, you know, left, right, wherever way it's going, you can either drag or you can kind of lead, and you'll get two different effects. Like if you start rotating first and then you pull the core up, you'll get a slightly different kind of feel to the animation. So it's always worth playing when you're starting to break things down and, you know, add overlaps and stuff. Try doing it the other way around. Sometimes it kind of works. It's hard to explain, but the more you do it, the more you kind of understand it. So from here, just sort of rotating first and then translating afterwards is the basic idea. Cool. Alright, so I'm kind of happy with her as a first pass. I'm not trying to do final animation at this point. I will do the final pass on it. I just want to get it to a point where it's kind of functional. Cool, so I'm quite happy with her. So let's do the dinosaur now. So let's take a look at what's going on with him. So Stomp itself is feeling quite nice timing wise, but obviously it's missing a lot of overlapping action. This actual stomp is a little bit soft. You see from here to here the way he eases, especially that foot coming down, it eases into it. I don't want that. I want it to come down linear and hit really hard. But overall it's a good starting point. Okay, so let's Let's start working into him. For this dinosaur stomp, I basically need to break it down a little bit more. We've got this kind of weird pose to pose thing happening here. Is in this pose, is in this pose. It's all feeling very robotic, so we get around that by kind of further breaking it down. So I want to keep this foot on the floor a little bit longer. So similar way to that we did her step, his hips need to basically come over to the right to allow this foot to lift off. So it's going to stick for longer, like so. And I can probably offset this stuff here by a frame so it doesn't come up so quick. Okay, it's going to sort of hover there for a second, and as it comes down it's going to come down on linear. So if we do that, see, it feels a little bit better, but I can actually push that by another frame so the foot hits first and then his body comes down afterwards. Okay, so that instantly kind of looks better. I need to figure out what to do with this back foot here, because at the moment it's just kind of sliding across. So there's two things I could do. I could either, actually there's only really one thing I can do, and that's kind of like a little hop. But I don't know about a dinosaur hopping, to be honest, if that's going to look weird. So I guess I can give it a go. So what I'm going to do is just kind of move this over here. I'm going to make this a quick breakdown that's up a little bit, so it's not kind of sliding. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. So the tricky thing is know where to put this hop. So it's going to have to be around about here when his weight is still up and his hips are still kind of travelling upwards. That's the only way he could actually be weightless enough to actually move that foot. So what I need to do as well is just check the curve on his translate Y on his cog, make sure that this is in a really nice shape. Let's move this camera down a little bit. It's really hard doing all this in one window. Usually you'd have two, so it's all very compact, but I'm doing my best. Alright, so let's have a look what's going on. I probably want a bit of a dip, a little bit of a pre-anticipation before he does anything. So he's going to come down slightly before he comes up. Okay, this is the part when he's kind of hovering. So ideally what I'd want is actually a bit more like this kind of shape. So it's not really a bouncing ball shape, it's more of an ease into this apex here, and then probably delay that by another frame, maybe even another frame. The longer I can delay this, the snappier it's going to be when he comes down. Ah, there we go, so that feels just about right. Foot still hits the floor first, body comes down afterwards, so that's good. Okay, so I don't think that hop is looking too terrible. I was worried he would look a bit like he's dancing. Alright, I'm just going to check the weight. Make sure I've got the right cut. No, it's not that one, it's this one here. So this one's going to be really important, side to side. I need to get this right. So again, what I'm going to do is just bring this back slightly so it doesn't start moving straight away. Okay, so he does need to get his weight over to the right before that foot comes up, but it doesn't need to be as extreme as that, so I'm feeling that that should be 2 frames later. Okay, maybe 1 frame later. Okay, it's kind of working. Let's add a bit of a curve to that there. Right, so now what I'm hoping is this is the magic bit where I do the rotate X. So the reason it kind of still looks very pose to pose is because it's all coming down exactly the same rate. There's a little bit of an offset there, but it's not anywhere where it needs to be. So what I'm going to do here going to offset rotate X by a couple of frames there. Going to keep him rotated up, so it's kind of similar shape to the translate Y. And at this point I'm going to move this across by a couple of frames. And then overshoot that there. Maybe give that a little bit more there. Okay, as you see he's kind of twisting and doing some weird stuff there, but that's fine. I'm going to fix that with the other rotates in a second. I just want the basic pattern in there. Cool, that's not looking too bad. It's all feeling a little bit fast though now. Now I've done that, you see he's kind of lost a little bit of his weight. I think because of the camera you kind of forget just how massive he is compared to her, so that's fine. What I might do is just try and just scale that entire bit. All this stuff here, just give it a little bit more. He's in no rush to do the raw. Okay, so let's see if that weight feels right. Yeah, it's definitely better. Some of it might be this rotation, so I'm going to fix these up first. Yeah, because I'm basically rotating on different axes here. I'm almost entering into Euler, you'll see, because these two curves are kind of doing the same thing, which is bad. And then this one here is doing what it's supposed to do, but because I've pushed these ones too far where I've turned him, I'm dangerously close to Euler, so I'm just going to run the Euler field to make sure I haven't actually gone past that point yet. But I do need to kind of untangle these a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm pretty sure rotate X is the correct one. That should be him rotating up and down. It's basically this one here I've messed up. And again, this is just me being a bit lazy with my rotates during the blocking process. So what I'm going to do is just simplify this curve way down and kind of flatten it out. Okay, and then that should then allow me to fix this rotate here. It should just be generally a little bit cleaner. So what I need to do now is actually bring that down a little bit more so that it's in his original position. There we go, and that's starting to look like it did, and I haven't got this rotate sort of adding much influence there, so that's good. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to take a look at rotate Y. This is his turn basically. So yeah, some of this junk can just go. Simplify that down, put an overshoot there. To rotate about here, so it's probably going to look something like that. It's going to reduce that down a little bit, just to keep him looking at her. Alright, so this should start to feel a little bit better now. Some of it's going to be in the upper body is kind of a bit wobbly still as well, so. Alright, so that's looking pretty good now. I need to add some texture to the actual raw itself, obviously, some boil. I'm thinking of doing that on an animation layer later, because there are other instances where I'm going to need it, so I'm kind of thinking ahead a little bit. Okay, so one thing with these kinds of rigs you need to be careful of is you've got your cog control that does this. Okay, you also got this control that does exactly the same. So if you're silly like me, I've actually got some keys here and there on this. Not many, you'll see in the graph video. Around about here I'm a bit worried. But it's always a good idea is to animate one or the other, usually the cog, and you kind of ignore this one. I know it's really hard to, really tempting to move this about, but imagine you're posing, you know, you're doing posing and stuff and you're moving this about, you're moving that about. I'm talking about in blocking, so you won't really notice. All of a sudden, you've got two controls working against each other. You've got zero control over it. Stuff is Eulering, and you basically have to reblock everything. So, always advise my students to just ignore that one. Even though it's very tempting to do little pose fixes. I mean, you can move it a little bit, but just be very sparing with it. Try to stick to your main cog for all kind of core controls. Cool. Right. So I'm going to do a bit of work on the chest here. So I'm going to ignore that one. Just these three here and see what's going on. So he comes down. I'm just going to add a bit more rotation here, just so it's doing something a bit different. Starting to try and build a bit of an arc coming around on his head there as he gets into the raw, and then again it just needs a bit of offsetting here. So as he's coming down, his upper body is going to come up slightly. Lowest point is here, so our reversal would be around about here, and then we do a, without him clipping the floor, we do a little bit of a down position and then try and stabilise whilst adding a little bit of ambient movement. But again, I'm going to let the boil deal with a lot of this stuff on the animation layer, so not too worried about adding too much to this at the moment. Cool, and then he comes back. Alright, might as well have a quick look at the tail before we finish, so let's see what's going on. So I put some shapes in here. Not great, it kind of needs some more. So I quite like that shape, comes around. This is without offsetting, so none of the magic has happened yet, but you notice how it's off screen there. I don't think there's any way that I can get that. Unless I push that around. I kind of just want to see the end, just to, so as it whips around you can kind of see it a little bit. And then I don't think I need that. You can just start coming back around to this C shape. So with towels, cloth, all that kind of stuff, at first all you're dealing with is C shapes. So you've got this C shape here. Actually that's an S shape, so that's naughty, that's a breakdown, but this C shape here, which is most extreme point, it then comes back around to this C shape. Okay, so what I might actually do is just delete that, because it's a bit naughty putting that there at the moment. Okay, so C shape, let's get rid of that as well, because that is actually a breakdown. Don't want any breakdowns basically, you want to deal with the most extreme rotation and just have it going from C shape to C shape. Make that a little bit quicker. And try and get that in the camera, because there's no point in doing this if you can't see it. Okay, then comes around to that C shape there. Okay, so I don't need that. So it should just be wagging back and forth, you know, like a dog's tail, basically, at this point. It's going to run the Euler filter to make sure there's no weirdness in it. Okay, it fixed some stuff towards the end, that's fine. Cool, now we're going to do some offsetting, and this should hopefully make it look a lot better. And then we can start breaking it down a little bit more. So, what you want to do is select all the controls on the tail, and we're just basically going to work our way down the hierarchy. So all selected, but you're actually going to deselect that one. I'm then going to offset all this by maybe 3 frames. I'm going to deselect, offset by 3 frames, deselect, and just work my way down. move that along by 3 frames. Okay, and then the last 3, exactly the same. Offset by 3 frames. So what you should start to see is S shapes within the C shapes, if that makes sense, because that's what gives that nice whipping effect. It's C to S to C. If you're not seeing those shapes in there, you know you've not offset enough, or you've offset too much. You can push it too far, and it, you know, it's kind of, it misses it. So you should see now we start to get a little bit of a nice organic tail going. So another thing is, the further down the hierarchy you go, the more rotation there is as well. So the controls down here will be pretty much stuck to his back and what that's doing, because it's really close to the hierarchy. The further down the hierarchy it gets, the more whippy it gets, therefore needs more rotations basically. So what you want to do is start then kind of using your eye and then breaking down these controls, maintaining the kind of S shape that's naturally kind of happening. Okay, so stuff like this, you see how it's coming across. Just going to give that a little bit more there, kind of use my eye. Okay, and then you see how it's kind of broken the S shapes. I'll put that back in. Really get this back that way. Okay, hopefully you can see that S. Get the reversal and the whip through. Okay, I can even offset that end one a little bit more. Okay, that's basically how you do towels, cloths, all that kind of stuff. That's how you get it going in the first. Obviously it needs a lot of keying into it, but it'll give you the basic kind of patterns that you kind of need. Cool. Okay, I think I'm going to finish there. But yeah, quite pleased with the progress. And yeah, if you've got any comments or questions, then feel free to ask. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.